The birth rate in America is plummeting to hell. How women and mothers are treated in this country, it needs to continue to plummet. So we're going to talk about this article from The Hill. Widespread disrespect, abuse in maternity care leave mothers with lasting trauma. Just to let you guys know, let you ladies know, there are some very triggering terms. Some of these things will make you squeamish. Some things will make you sick. Knowing and understanding the traumas that some women go through to deliver these babies, and is honestly just going to get worse, because as these forced birther states run off more and more physicians, the people that are left will be the worst of the worst probably, or they will just be rushed and simply not take care or do proper care for the women that are still opting to have babies in these forced birther states. Let's get into this. Like I said, there are going to be some very sensitive topics that might make you cringe or make you want to scroll away. Let's talk maternal trauma. Kimberly Turbin thought she was going to be a happy mom, but that was snatched from me. She says the first time she gave birth. Up until then, I had a perfect pregnancy. I didn't have any nausea. Nothing was wrong with me. Her water broke while she was at a friend's house, and she went home to shower before going to the hospital. Once there, she let the staff know she had been previously raped and asked them to be communicative with her throughout her delivery. She remembers them giving her a pill to help her calm down because she was growing anxious. And I did calm down. I thought I was going to push the baby out, and everything was great. Everybody was really nice still. But shortly after she began pushing, her obstetrician, Alex Abassi, told her he was going to perform an episiotomy, or cut into her sensitive skin between her vajayjay and anus, known as the perineum, to widen her vaginal opening. They just literally cut down there. And a lot of the time, they're not even really getting consent from these women. Turbin repeatedly objected to the procedure, which the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recommends doing only when absolutely necessary. What? Why? We haven't even tried, she can be heard saying in a video of the birth taken by her mother that she later posted online. Why can't we just try? Abassi said the baby wasn't coming out, and if she continued to try to push, it's going to rip the butthole down clean. When she protested more than once, telling him no and pleading, "Don't cut me," he told her he was the expert and that she could go home and do it or go to Kentucky. Some of these doctors have this God complex where they do not feel that they have to listen to the patients. He then cut into her perineum a dozen different times. Turbin, who went on to sue Abassi for assault and battery, says she's still grappling with the physical and emotional toll of his actions more than a decade later. Dr. Abassi snatched my decision-making for my body from me because of what he did, and he left me with PTSD for life and nerve damage. Mothers' mistreatment at the hands of the very healthcare workers meant to help them through the pregnancy and childbirth is a rampant and dangerous problem in maternity care. 1 in 5 mothers in the United States report being ignored, threatened, forced to accept treatment they didn't consent to, physically abused, or otherwise mistreated by their providers during pregnancy and delivery, according to a recent report from the CDC. Among Black, Hispanic, and multiracial mothers and those who have public insurance or no insurance, the rates are higher still, closer to 1 in 3. Turbin, who is Latina and was insured through California's Medicaid, belonged to both groups. And American healthcare workers are far from the worst offenders. A 2019 study led by the WHO in Ghana, Guinea, Nigeria, and Myanmar, for instance, found that more than 40% of mothers whose deliveries researchers observed were mistreated during childbirth. These experiences of disrespect and abuse can have a devastating impact, heightening risk for mothers and their children during an already vulnerable period and continuing to affect them long afterwards. Mistreatment has been linked to an increased likelihood of dangerous delivery complications such as obstructed labor and excessive bleeding, as well as postpartum hemorrhage and abdominal pain. It can also deal a blow to parents' mental health, as can complications in physical pain it contributes to. Mothers who have been mistreated are at greater risk of developing postpartum depression. Their mistreatment can fuel childbirth-related post-traumatic stress disorder. And when they turn back to the healthcare professionals for help or try to seek justice through hospitals, medical boards, or courts, they can find themselves confronting a lack of care or awareness, if not more disrespect and abuse. The reverberations of trauma. Postpartum depression, the most common perinatal mood disorder, affects about 17% of mothers around the world and 20% in developing nations. Mothers who have been mistreated appear to grapple with it at significantly higher rates, about 50% higher, according to one recent study. Information on the relative prevalence of childbirth-related PTSD following disrespect or abuse is harder to come by, but researchers have identified mistreatment as a significant risk factor for the condition, and poor experiences with healthcare workers loom large in descriptions of traumatic deliveries. One widely cited study found that roughly 2/3 of mothers who suffered birth trauma, regardless of whether it resulted in PTSD, said their provider's actions were what made the experience traumatizing. Childbirth-related PTSD, like other forms of the disorder, usually stems from a person experiencing an event as a real threat to their life or potential threat, says Sharon Deckel, an assistant professor of psychology at Harvard Medical School and the founding director of the postpartum traumatic stress disorders research program at Massachusetts General Hospital. That feeling could arise from physical complications during labor, she says, or from something psychologically being violated. Deckel and her colleagues have found that roughly 5% to 6% of mothers develop PTSD after a successful birth, while as many as 17% display clinically significant symptoms. The effects of traumatic births aren't limited to the mothers at their center either. People who bear witness can be traumatized as well, Deckel says, and parents with PTSD can experience difficulties caring for their babies, whom they may associate with their trauma. PTSD, postpartum depression, and other perinatal mental health conditions have been found to negatively affect parenting quality and early relationships between parents and children, which in turn can impair childhood development. Research has also indicated that trauma can reverberate through generations, possibly even leaving a tangible mark on family genes. This is epigenetics being talked about, but they didn't name it. This is something Turbin thinks about, how her mistreatment and its lingering effects may affect her children. I would cry a lot, or maybe I would scream more than I would like to, she remembers. I had to get hypnotized to stop screaming at my kids. Years after her traumatic delivery, she says everything she feels raw, and at times she experiences panic or shuts down. Sometimes when her children are screaming, she just ignores them. Because of Abbasi's actions, she says, I never became the mom I wanted to be. Parents affected by childbirth-related PTSD may feel like they're reliving the birth through intrusive thoughts or flashbacks. Try to avoid reminders of the experience, including pregnancy, and grapple with depression and negative alterations in mood and cognition. They also may be gripped by guilt and shame, she says, believing they failed their children or their bodies have failed them. The same feelings often plague parents with postpartum depression, along with helplessness, hopelessness, restlessness, sadness, anxiety, and emptiness. Some have thoughts of self-deletion. Some translate those thoughts into actual attempts. The healthcare industry has a lot to fix. How they treat mothers is one of those things. And we're going to keep talking about this along with maternal mortality rates and women just not being whole when they come out, because this process is breaking people and is traumatic, and it's a cycle that continues to harm the women and the babies. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think of it. This is a long article, but tell me. This article that I did from The Hill was pretty long, so I had to split it up into 2 parts. But we're going to continue this conversation about maternal trauma. Let's talk about broken trust. As well as exacerbating both physical and mental health risks, mistreatment can fracture mothers' trust in the healthcare workers, making them leery of receiving treatment in the future. When somebody experiences mistreatment of any kind from a medical provider, really specific things happen. There's now a decrease in trust. There's a decrease in confidence on the part of the individual. They second guess themselves. They might blame themselves for problems that are going on. Mostly, they don't want to have the same negative experience they had before. Now, this can happen with any kind of organization. Think about how the Black community feels about the police, because there's broken trust from people that you are supposed to be able to trust. The same goes with medical workers, doctors, especially because they are supposed to be an authority figure. But if they disrespect your wishes, that's going to break that trust. This can cause people to stop going to appointments, she says, or to put a mask to try to appear better and healthier and less weak, to avoid the terms of the experience before if they do return to a provider. Mothers who suffer mistreatment have been found to be less likely to seek care throughout their pregnancies and in the wake of giving birth, a critical period for ensuring the long-term health and even survival of both mothers and their children. Medical mistrust can also contribute to women of color, in particular, eschewing perinatal mental health services, and it can cause people to put off care or decline to take medical advice for health issues extending far beyond maternity and postpartum care. To this day, I really don't feel comfortable going to hospitals, says Sabrina Tate, citing the ways her doctors treated her during labor and postpartum care in the pandemic. I always have this sense of whoever walks in, is everyone going to be able to walk out? I'm always questioning medical providers. After Tate went into early labor, roughly 6 months into pregnancy, the doctors at the hospitals she was admitted to weren't answering her questions and were brushing off the situation, she says. She remembers being told, these things just happen and we just have to wait and see. One doctor from the neonatal intensive care unit, or NICU, told Tate, who is Black, don't worry about it. Black females are the strongest babies in the NICU, she recalls. The comment made her think about the harmful biases surrounding Black women's pain that have long affected their medical treatment. It made her worry what else her providers might be thinking. Due in part to implicit and structural bias in the medical system, Black mothers in the United States face deadly disparities when it comes to pregnancy and childbirth. They are 3 times as likely as their white counterparts to die due to pregnancy-related causes, according to the CDC. They're also about 50% more likely to give birth preterm, one of the leading causes of infant mortality. I just remember being in that hospital room and being like, I don't feel safe. I don't feel like none of these people have my best interest at heart right now, Tate recalls. Like either myself or my daughter's not going to make it out of this hospital. She decided to leave and went to another hospital the following day. The care she received there was totally different and more attentive, she says, but her daughter ultimately passed away. The last time Tate went to a medical provider was her 6-week postpartum checkup, during which a midwife who had not read her chart asked her, "How's the baby?" I just feel like they don't really care. She did see a therapist in the wake of her experience, whom she'd already been connected with when she previously dealt with postpartum depression, but she says she wasn't really able to find a lot when she searched for other support resources. Not wanting other parents to experience the same loneliness she felt, she has worked to become a resource herself by going through bereavement doula training, building her own doula service, and becoming a birth trauma group leader at Postpartum Support International. Turban, too, has sought to help other parents. In the years since her traumatic delivery, she has plunged into advocacy on medical board reform, maternal mortality, and mistreatment. While discussing her own experience, she speaks passionately about the cases of several other women who suffered mistreatment or died in childbirth, and about Latinas' invisibility in conversations surrounding maternal mortality. My advocacy just keeps on growing because I have a lot of work to do. The fight for awareness and accountability. Disrespect and abuse in maternity care, also in some cases referred to obstetric violence, has in recent years been recognized as a human rights violation by international organizations including the WHO and the UN, and explicitly outlawed by several Latin American nations. Most countries still have no laws expressly prohibiting it, however. In fact, the law sometimes serves as an instrument for mistreatment, as in the case of court-ordered C-sections, and efforts to combat providers' disrespect and abuse or hold them accountable for their actions are an uphill battle. But they say most of these efforts end in disappointment, and it can open a wound for people as they navigate months or even years-long processes that often involve hospitals, providers, courts, and or other entities invalidating the experiences they had and basically saying it needed to happen this way. Turban filed complaints against Advocacy with the Hospital and Medical Board of California. In addition to suing him, 2 years after performing her delivery, he surrendered his medical license, acknowledging physical and mental deterioration related to his age. He and Turban later settled her lawsuit out of court. She hopes to set a precedent with the case in which a California judge ruled Advocacy's actions could be tried as potential assault and battery, but at the same time, she says she doesn't recommend other people follow in her footsteps. The psychological and the mental anguish isn't just from assault. Is from everything along with the assault that happened to me. For me, I wasn't just assaulted. I was also part of a movement to spread awareness. And yeah, I didn't have to be, but then I had to be. There was no going back. I always say I'm going to do it, and I did. But I'm telling you, I paid the price for it. My kids paid the price for it. Now, as I was doing this article, I also thought about the women that have come forward when someone has SA'd them or raped them, and how the system continues to re-victimize people, and how women's bodies just aren't a priority. This all works together in how women are disrespected in these patriarchal countries that edify men in their reputation in their jobs, and don't care about women's bodies, and that we deserve to have our humanity respected. This was long, but it needed to be said, and it needed to be said for the non-white women who are out there who have their voices silenced and our experience ignored. We need to see and understand what women are going through, and the reason why the maternal mortality rate is so high, and why I say that the birth rate needs to plummet to hell, because things have got to change in this country and globally for women, so women can be safe as they are having children. Okay, that was the end of this. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think about this whole thing. Like, comment, share, and if you made it this far and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit the follow button.